From the moment that Ferguson erupted, how did anchors and producers decide what to put on the air and what needed further checking? I sat down with a co-host of America's Newsroom here in Washington. Bill Hemmer, welcome.
Thank you, Howie. It's good to be with you here.
Much of the early reporting on Ferguson now turns out to be wrong. How did you decide in the early days and weeks what to air, what not to air each day on America's Newsroom?
It's a critical question and one that came with a lot of sensitivity, frankly, throughout the entire process. I felt that what the president had to say, I guess it was on Monday night now, about the media and the responsibility of the media was very well taken. It was my sense in the 10 days leading up to the grand jury decision, you had networks from all over the world who had already gone to Ferguson waiting for something to happen.
And promoting it constantly on the air.
Yeah, and count the number of live shots you saw from an empty parking lot. And listen, it's our duty and responsibility to understand the power that we have.
Just by showing up.
If we're a driving force for that story, we have to be extra careful.
Right. And of course, the counter-argument is, how can you not be there? Something could happen. But it was kind of promoted almost as a show, you know, decision imminent. We're here. Something could happen.
I'm not saying they should not have been there. Well, what I am arguing, though, is that I thought we were judicious in the number of reports that we use and how we use them. I was watching last Friday afternoon one other cable network, and it was 2 hours of uninterrupted coverage from Ferguson, Missouri. Nothing had happened. And if you
since this is a media show, which network were you watching?
I was watching CNN, and it was nearly wall to wall. If you go back and look at some of the images from late August when it all started, Howie, there are pictures that you can still find online of the protests where it was 50-50. It was 50% protesters and 50% photographers and reporters.
Right.
And I think you really have to understand the context based on the number of media personnel who flew into Ferguson over the last 3 months and how they ranked and stacked up compared to the number of protesters. It's very important.
But go back to that earlier period after the shooting of Michael Brown. Eyewitnesses, or people who claim to be eyewitnesses, were popping up saying he was shot in the back, he had his hands up. We now know that those accounts, most of them, are discredited.
Based on the grand jury testimony.
Were you and Martha and your producers reluctant to put some of that on if it had not been confirmed by Fox News? What do you do if other people are reporting it?
Very difficult. One, we tried to exercise a lot of caution and discretion. And I think we did a pretty good job of that overall. You know, in hindsight, you look at that now and you think, wow, should you have done that? That's a difficult line to walk. But now you have the grand jury testimony and the public can make up their own mind.
Were you concerned during that earlier period that there was a one-sided narrative that was emerging, which was, you know, Michael Brown was an innocent victim? This is before we knew about the altercation in the car, before we knew a lot of things, before we knew exactly where he was shot. And we weren't hearing it all from Darren Wilson's side. Did you think about that?
I think, unfortunately, that's just reality, and it happens that way. And it's not just in Missouri, it's on multiple stories that we've seen over the years.
Puts journalists in a difficult position.
I agree, but it comes back to the point I made about the president's point the other night, is that we have a huge responsibility, especially when it comes to the tender subject of race in America.
Race in America in a way that can lead to violence in America, as we unfortunately have seen. Let me switch you to politics in our final minute. You're from Ohio. You live in New York, so you're not experiencing all the Beltway dysfunction here all the time, but you certainly report on it.
I feel like it's a Bermuda Triangle down here sometimes. I can't figure out how to get out of it.
Well, it's an endless series of cliffs and ultimatums and showdown and rhetoric, and obviously not a lot getting done in this capital city. But do you also think that people are less interested in politics these days for that reason, and does that affect how much you cover it?
It's a great question. I'm not so sure I know the exact answer on that. I don't think the people are less interested in politics. I think if you want to reflect on the turnout for the past midterm, it was like most other midterm elections. We were awash in it because of the control of Congress that was in the balance. But you got to think, Howie, in August there were 16 races that were considered competitive in the Senate. By October, that went down to 10 or 12. And that's where all the money was spent. All the attention was given. It was those people in those states that they were getting the attention. And the rest of the country just had a regular, if I could use that word, regular, midterm election that we've seen for decades now.
Right. I mean, I thought it was a fascinating election, but I just had the sense the public wasn't quite as engaged, and I think that drives media decisions as well.
Perhaps, maybe, but I think in North Carolina...
Unless you're living in a battleground state or a battleground district.
That's right.
Bill Hemmer, thanks very much for joining us.
Great to be with you, Howie. You bet.
Up next, some of Bill Cosby's media enablers say they're sorry for not calling him out.